Hey everybody, Bandicoot Commando here and welcome back to Marvel Rivals. Last time, we read the lore on Hela here. We read the Messenger of the Abyss story, where basically, after the time stream entanglement, a symbiote emissary arrived and delivered a message warning to Hela straight from Null. Basically that when Null awakens and unleashes his power, he's gonna take over Hell. But Hela has found some chronovium and has some plans for it. And based on the way it read, I have this weird feeling this might come to play in a later season. Just a, just a sneaky suspicion. So today we are gonna read The Human Torch. Jonathan Johnny Storm, the Fantastic Four's resident heartthrob, Johnny Storm adds an intense flair to every battle he fights. Shrouded in roaring flames, the Human Torch always manages to look cool while turning up the heat. I don't have any of his costumes. I mean, to be honest, it says I have 100 usage, but Johnny is just one of those heroes that I feel needs some serious work on. Not because he's a recent addition alongside Ben, but I feel like he really needs some work before I can even attempt to do more, because I just don't like the way he plays as of now. Anyway, Jonathan Johnny Storm. Teenager Johnny Storm joined his sister on the crew of an experimental space mission in hopes of visiting the stars. Instead, he became one, gaining powers and popularity as a member of the world-famous Fantastic Four. Able to generate scorching flames, Johnny is the hottest hero in town, the Human Torch. Since darkness fell on New York City, Johnny has been busy burning Dracula's legions with flames brighter than the sun. Alright, here we go. Fire Exemption Test. Wait, before I start, I need to get some water in me real quick. Okay, that should help. Reading really takes a lot out of you. Johnny Storm saw a vampire skulking along the edge of Bryant Park and did what he always did on such an occasion. Lit it up like a Roman candle. Then he saw another one, trying to get away around the corner onto Fifth Avenue. Boom! That one was gone too. He did this every night, or every day. It was hard to tell what time it was in Dracula's New York, because the sun never came up, and the moon always hung low and red, seemingly right over Grand Central. Either way, the Human Torch kept the area near the Baxter Building as free of vampires as he could. That meant a lot of vampires had gone up in smoke because of him. That in turn meant that Johnny Storm was currently #1 on Dracula's hit list. The vampire-in-chief had sent some of his top lieutenants after Johnny, veterans of the cult of the Darkholders, but either Johnny had lit them up too, or he had gotten away before they can get a bite on him. Vampires couldn't bite you when you were made of superheated plasma. That was one reason why he went out on these patrols every day. He was safer than more New Yorkers from the threat of vampires, which made him especially well suited to vampire population control, especially in the area around the Baxter Building, which was uncomfortably close to Dracula's castle. Johnny did this because he didn't want vampires around the Baxter Building, but also because he knew that smoking so many vampires right around the castle, where Dracula would watch, was like waving a big old middle finger at the vampire lord. That's a strong usage. This game is rated T, but the fact that it mentions a middle finger. He might have stopped time and imprisoned New York in a weird eternal blood moon night, But that didn't mean New Yorkers were just going to give up. Johnny stayed in the air, heading south on Madison to make sure no masses of undead monsters were gathering in that direction. Also, he thought Ben Grimm was doing his own sweeps of the section of Park Avenue south of Dracula's castle. Probably vampires couldn't bite Ben either, but Johnny wanted to make sure. They couldn't afford to lose him. There were so many vampires, so many monsters, and not nearly enough superheroes left to defend the innocent from them. Blade was around, Moon Knight, the Scarlet Witch. Pretty quickly, Johnny ran out of names. Oh, there was also Spider-Man, of course, one of Johnny's oldest friends. He'd stayed to fight the vampires, but he was also dying to get across the East River and see about Aunt May in Queens. New York wouldn't be New York without him. Johnny decided to angle over to Park and see if Ben was staying out of trouble. He hadn't seen any vampires in a few blocks as he swooped diagonally over the shadow buildings lining Park Avenue. He heard an echoing boom and saw a column of smoke blast upward from the center of the street. As it cleared, Johnny saw something so crazy that it took a minute to convince himself it was actually real. The creature that tore its way up through the street was a midnight blue in color, maybe 10 times the size of an elephant, had 3-digit pincers instead of hands, and moved like a dinosaur in an old stop-motion monster movie. It was one of the deviant mutates the FF had run into their first mission together, way back when. Mole Man had a whole stable of bizarre creatures ready to unleash on the world. Johnny remembered this one because it was made of stone, but somehow it still moved, kind of like Ben Grimm, now that he thought about it. And now here, it was tearing a huge hole in Park Avenue, revealing a destroyed subway tunnel below, and a cavern below that. As he got a better look at it, Johnny realized that something was different about it, and its surprise appearance suddenly made a lot more sense. Its eyes, he saw, burned with the empty glow you saw in lower level vampires, the minions of Dracula, and the other more powerful vampires created at will. So not only was it a giant rock monster, Johnny thought, it was a giant vampire rock monster. Clearly, Dracula was sick of just throwing more and more humanoid vampires at Johnny. He decided to take a different tack. This was a problem. Johnny couldn't burn it, so he wasn't sure at first how to fight back as the creature smashed its way up Madison Avenue toward the Baxter Building. It bared stony fangs and snapped at Johnny, who veered out of the way, streaking its side with fire to no effect. Holy smokes, he thought. Was it a vampire now, too? How did they even bite this thing? Johnny wondered out loud. It was made of stone. If he couldn't burn it, how could a vampire bite it? The creature swiped at Johnny, missed, and brought its gigantic pincers down on the street hard enough that manhole covers up and down Madison Avenue flew into the air like giant spinning coins. From the corner of 33rd, Ben Grimm charged into view. "Torch, you just draw trouble wherever you go," he growled. "Vampires ain't bad enough." I can't do Ben's voice. I'm not good at doing New York accents. "This one's a vampire too," Johnny called back, as the creature bared stone fangs and snapped at Ben. The thing swatted its jaws to the side and tried to stomp it back into the hole it made. "Crazy," he shouted. "This town's gone to heck in a handbasket since Dracula came along." The monster shook Ben off and tried to spring on him, but for a guy made of orange rocks, Ben Grimm was fairly nimble. He got out of the way. "What are we going to do about it?" This was a good question. Johnny couldn't burn it, so the best thing they could do was what Ben was trying to do. put it back in its hole and make sure it didn't come out again. The monster snapped at Johnny again as he swooped close, harrying it, and it might have gotten him too if a taut cable of spider webbing had it whipped out of nowhere and pulled its head to the side. "Hey, Torch!" Spider-Man called out as he swung into view. "My spidey sense has been tingling like crazy for the last 10 minutes. Now I know why." "You're just in time," Johnny answered, as he distracted the monster again by swooping close to its snapping jaws, and then narrowly avoiding its pincers, which stabbed through the air where he had been just a second before. "Get some webs on it, Pete. I'm going to dive under it." "You're gonna what?" the thing echoed incredulously. "Easy," Johnny said. "Pete gets it hanging over the hole, I get underneath it. Then break the webs and I'll help it down the hole." "From underneath," the thing echoed again. "Trust me," Johnny said as he dodged another pincer. "I can't break my webs," Spider-Man said. "They're too strong." "Can I?" the thing asked. "Don't remember ever trying." "Maybe," Spider-Man wondered. "I hate to plan on it, you know." Yeah, Johnny had a thought. "Ben, if you can't break the webs, you could just tear off part of the building they're stuck to, right?" "Sure," Ben said, "but you forgot one thing. I can't climb like him," jutting a rocky thumb at Spider-Man, "and I can't fly like you." Johnny glanced over at Spider-Man and saw that Pete was reaching the same conclusion he was. "I think we can work around that," he said. "Aw, no," Ben said. "I don't wanna." But Spider-Man had already snapped a web onto his back and started swinging him up in the air. More webs followed, binding the monster to the upper corners of the building on both sides of Park Avenue, so it hung in the middle, half and half out of the hole it had made. Here was the hard part, Johnny thought. He had to get the monster to stay in one place, and the best way to do that was to offer himself up as bait. So he dove underneath it, and the monster pounced. Both of its pincers clamped down on Johnny, not hurting him much, but keeping him pinned as the monster bared its fangs. Here's where he would have to find out if he was right that vampires couldn't bite superheated plasma, Johnny thought. He focused and felt his temperature getting hotter, then hotter still, then so hot that the subway tracks and the concrete pillars inside the ruined station started to buckle. "Now, Ben!" he shouted again. Up above, Ben Grimm tore Spider-Man's web away from its anchor on the corner of the office tower. Maybe a cubic yard of brick and concrete came with it, tumbling down to crash onto the monster stone carparse. And Johnny Storm went nova. The vast mass of the stone monster blocked most of the nova blast from surging upward and down and out on toward the street. The blast wave radiated downward into the tunnel carved by the stone deviant on its way up from the deep caves where it originated, melting stone along with reinforced concrete of the subway tunnel. The monster couldn't burn, but the shock of the nova blast stunned it and let Johnny break free. He streaked up out of the hole as it collapsed over the monster, which tumbled into the bottomless cavern it had crawled out of just a few minutes before. Molten asphalt, steel, and stone sealed the hole, cooling quickly into a huge pit in the middle of Park Avenue. "Phew," Johnny thought. "Flame off," he said, and dropped to the street. Ben lowered into view on the end of one of Spider-Man's webs. "This is humiliating," he said. "Couldn't have done it without you, Benji," Johnny grinned. As the thing's feet hit the pavement, Spider-Man swung down and landed next to him. "Pretty neat trick," he said. "Yeah, not bad," Johnny said. "All about teamwork." "Who ever heard of a vampire rock monster?" Ben was looking at the pit, and then his wonderment was replaced by his typical pessimism. It might come up again, you know. Johnny looked down at the wreckage and then up Park Avenue toward Dracula's castle. Yeah, he said, I know. This isn't a war we're gonna win tonight, but it is a war we're going to win. The longer he looked at Dracula's castle, the more Johnny imagined he could see Dracula looking back at him, cold and angry at the failure of his latest scheme to extinguish the human torch once and for all. He loved it. Come and get me, he dared the distant vampire lord, if you got the guts. Well, that's it for this one. Kind of neat to see that at least this version of Johnny, he was able to come up with a plan to stop something. Because normally when the four are working together, it's always Reed that comes up with the quick plans to stop the threat. But the fact that it was Johnny that was, just shows that he's not just a hot shot, if you will. He is the sister, he is the brother to his sister. So he's able to make his own plans that can work. But this means that, you know, Mole Man, I don't know if he's going to get involved or not, but who knows. Alrighty, that will do for this episode of Marvel Rivals. Join me next time as we read up on his sister, the Invisible Woman. So that is it, and I will see you guys next time.